Good morning, everyone. I'm very pleased to be here with you today, and I'm delighted that you're interested in the results of this very important survey. So we are here today to present findings from the 2009 Ontario Student Drug Use and Health Survey. The OSDUHS, which has been conducted every 2 years since 1977, is the longest ongoing survey in schools in Canada and the second longest in North America. Let me also, like Jürgen, recognize the exceptional contributions of our colleague, Dr. Ed Adlaff, to the development of the OSDUHS survey over the years, and those of Angela Boak, who, as project manager, has successfully undertaken the very, very large task of ensuring that this year's OSDUHS has been successfully completed. Before I turn to the drug use findings from the survey, let me briefly describe the study features. In late 2008 and early 2009, about 9,100 students in grades 7 through to 12 from 47 public and Catholic school boards in 181 schools across the province completed anonymous questionnaires in their classrooms. The sample represents or is representative of over 1 million students in Ontario. Now, let me turn to the major results. To begin, 4 findings we find are particularly prominent in this year's OSDUHS. First, no drug monitored by the study, either licit or illicit, showed a significant change in 2009 compared to the last survey conducted in 2007. While in the earlier part of the decade we did see year-to-year declines in the use of several substances, we found no overall declines between 2007 and 2009. Second, alcohol still remains the student's drug of choice. Over half of all students, at 58%, drink alcohol. And when we look at only older students, over 3/4 drink. Cannabis is the next drug of choice. Cannabis use remains elevated, as about 25% of all students have used cannabis in the past year, and use increases significantly with grade. Third, the 2009 survey continued to monitor the non-medical use of prescription opioid pain relievers as a general class of drugs. This class of drugs includes prescription codeine, Percocet, Percodan, Tylenol-3, Demerol, OxyContin, and can be dangerous, very dangerous when used non-medically. The 2009 survey found that about 18% of students used a drug like this in the past year without a prescription. This prevalence ranks 3rd after cannabis. Fourth, when we take an overview and look at all of the illicit and non-medical use of 24 drugs asked about in the survey, that is excluding alcohol and tobacco, we find that 42% of students have used at least one drug in the past year. Not surprisingly, use increases with grade, with over half of 11th and 12th graders using at least one drug in the past year. As is typically the case, our findings convey both good and bad news. Let me begin with some of the encouraging findings. The majority of students do not smoke cigarettes, and our 2009 estimate for past year smoking at 12% is among the lowest on record. This is a sharp contrast to a decade ago in 1999, when smoking was approaching a prevalence rate of 30%. The downward trend in smoking that we have seen among Ontario students has also been noted among youth in other Canadian provinces and in the United States. While the 2009 survey showed no changes in any substance use since the 2007 survey, trends over the past 10 years, and especially over the past 30 years, show a decline in alcohol and illicit drug use. Several drugs, but not cannabis, have shown significant declines over the past 10 years. These include hallucinogenic drugs, methamphetamine, and ecstasy. The use of alcohol has declined over the past decade from 66% reporting use in 1999 down to 58% in 2009. Therefore, alcohol has moved in parallel with illicit drug use to a considerable degree. This downward movement in drinking and illicit drug use has also been seen in other regions. Although there has been recent concern regarding methamphetamine and crystal methamphetamine in some populations, we found that to date, neither drug has diffused into the mainstream adolescent population in Ontario, as rates of both are very low. In fact, methamphetamine use among students over time has shown a downward trend to almost negligible rates of use. This is important given the high potential for dependence and other harms associated with these drugs. One of the many objectives and major objectives of prevention programs is to delay the initiation of drug use. We are comforted to see progress in this area. Today, we have fewer students who begin using alcohol, tobacco, and cannabis at an early age. In other words, students today are not trying these substances at younger ages than in the past. For example, in 2009, only 2% of 7th graders smoked a whole cigarette by the time they were in grade 6, compared to 40% in 1981. About 17% of 7th graders in 2009 drank more than just a few sips of alcohol by grade 6, and this compares to 50% in 1981. A few findings, though, raise public health concerns. There is still a significant percentage of students that smoke cigarettes, 12% of about 120,000 Ontario students. Also concerning is that we did not see an overall decline in use from 2007 to 2009, although we have seen these declines earlier in the decade. Cigarette smoking is the leading preventable cause of disease and is thus of great concern. Binge drinking remains elevated. About 25% of all students and about half of 12th graders report binging on at least 5 drinks at one session during the month before the survey. This pattern of drinking is known to be related to the increased likelihood of injuries and other harms. Further, 1 in 5, or about 21% of students, show indications of an alcohol problem as measured by the Alcohol Use Disorders Identification Test. Another area of concern is related to vehicles. Despite long-term declines in drinking and driving, there is still about 1 in 8, or about 12%, of licensed student drivers who drink and drive. An even higher percentage, at 17%, of licensed students report driving after using cannabis. Moreover, about 1/4 of all students rode with a driver who had been drinking alcohol, and about 18% with a driver who had been using drugs. Especially worrisome is the likelihood of being a passenger with an intoxicated driver from either alcohol or drugs, which increases significantly with grade. For example, 1 in 3 12th graders report this behavior. These behaviors increase the risk of unintentional injuries, which is a leading cause of death, or the leading cause of death among youth. Finally, as I mentioned earlier, the relatively high prevalence of non-medical use of prescription drugs, such as opioid pain relievers, is concerning. When we look at any non-medical prescription drug use, including opioids, drugs to treat ADHD, or sedative-type drugs, the past year prevalence reaches 20% overall. The non-medical use of prescription drugs, as well as over-the-counter drugs, is popular among teens for various reasons, one of which is their wide accessibility. Indeed, we know from our data that 3/4 of those who've used an opioid drug without their own prescription report obtaining these drugs from home. Therefore, parents and the public in general should be aware of the potential for misuse of medications. Thus, while we are making progress, there is still work to do. What I have presented here are some key findings to provide an overview of drug use among Ontario students in 2009. The full report, which contains much more detailed information, is available on our website, at www.camh.net.